go.
All right, sounds good. I will go ahead and share my screen. Oh, wrong one. I was like, there's only 2 options. Don't share the wrong one. All right, I'm just gonna do this. This works. All right, you guys see this?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so I'm Phil. Last name is Dangerfield, which is probably easier to remember. So it's kind of important that you understand what motivates me in life. And it seems silly, but it's true. Ice cream does indeed motivate me. Like, I work throughout the day, and then I know that after we get the kids down to sleep, I'm having some ice cream. Good design definitely motivates me. I truly believe that good design changes the world very drastically. Longboarding, pretty straightforward. Video games, definitely. And then faith and family, that's the foundation that kind of gives everything else meaning, right? That's the reason that I work. That's the reason I try to improve myself every day, and I try to learn every day. That's the core of it all. So when it comes down to it, my philosophy when it comes to people is you can put them on a scale between artist and engineer, and it takes some time for you to kind of figure out where you are on that scale. And a lot of times it takes just a lot of pressure to figure out where you are in that scale. And for a long time, I thought I was like way over here on the artist side until I got further along in my career as a graphic designer. And I looked at other people around me and I was like, okay, they are the artists. I am not like way over here. So I'm a lot closer to center than I am artist, but I'm still a little bit further on that side.
Hey, Phil.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think we're not quite capturing you using your screen to like move and talk about that scale.
Oh.
It'd be your first screen that talks about your motivations. Sorry to interrupt.
It's still on that one?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, now do you see my philosophy?
Yes.
All right, cool. You're like, what is he talking about? Okay, so this is that scale that I was talking about. Artist is way over here, engineers over here. And I'm to the left of the center. So I'm not quite over here, even though for a long time I thought I was over here. All right. Okay, so I worked a couple of different graphic design jobs before I started. I was the art director for the Salt Lake Bees, which is a minor league baseball team. And it was about this time that I was looking at some of the other designers who worked, I mean, both online, but I worked closely with like the designers of the Utah Jazz. And some of them had less experience than I did as far as like years, but they were like way more talented artistically. And so I was like, okay, this is kind of the time where I was realizing like, okay, maybe I'm not an artist. I'm not meant to be a great graphic designer. And so I started looking for new options, and I found Dev Mountain, which is it's like a coding boot camp, but they had a course for UX design. So I went to that course. This is a picture that I just kind of took haphazardly. And this is our instructor, Mike. Mike Curtis is awesome. If you guys ever want to connect with a really, really talented UX guy, Mike Curtis on LinkedIn. Actually, on LinkedIn, he's Michael Curtis. Yeah, super, super nice guy. And he's one of those dudes, he's like passionate about helping young designers. So I would connect with him. So I went through the course at Dev Mountain. I learned kind of like the basics, the fundamentals of UX design and UX research. And so I went back to the Bees. I mean, I was still at the Bees. I was going to these classes at night. So obviously with the minor league baseball, everything is done in seasons. And I prepare for each season in the off season. I like create the whole marketing brand guide and all these kind of things. And so before that off season started, I started going to the baseball games, and I was talking to people, And I was like asking him questions like, what brings you out to the ballpark? Like, what's your favorite thing about coming to games at the ballpark, that kind of thing. And one thing that I noticed is we have these frames, these metal frames, like all over the ballpark. We had like 30 of them. And I would design these posters that would go in these frames for specialty nights. So like Star Wars night or Princess night or Jazz night. And every once in a while, one of these posters would get stolen. And it was a great compliment to me that like someone liked my designs enough to steal one of my posters. But I started creating these posters where it just said it's better at the ballpark. And it was a picture of, this is me as Spicy Kyle. So I'm the guy that's actually in the suit here. I created him for Dollar Dog Wednesdays. No, it's another story, but I just started using pictures of like families, you know, like a father and a son eating a hot dog, or like a mother and her daughter sitting on the berm on the grass just watching the baseball game. And these posters got stolen at like 10 times the rate. And I was like, whoa, like, okay, there's something to this. Because all of our marketing up to that point was like player focused. It was all about the players. It was all about the team. It was about the score, like all these kind of things. But when I talked to these people at the games, like they didn't care, right? They didn't know any of the players' names. They kind of like, they wanted the Bees to win, but if they didn't, like, they weren't going to lose sleep over it, you know? So I shifted our whole marketing campaign towards like ballpark experiences, you know, like really what the people were going to the games for. And it ended up setting a couple records. My digital ad campaign was the most successful and highly trafficked digital ad campaign in minor league history across like the whole, out of all the teams. And I sold more tickets online than any other team in minor league history. And I was like, holy cow, like all I had to do was like ask some people what they want, you know? Like I just had to ask the user, our customer, like what they were there to do and why they were doing it. So that was the first time that I like applied those UX research principles, and it like really, really changed how things turned out. So after I was done working for the Bees, I went on to another like graphic design position, but I was like, I know that I need to just boost up my UX portfolio if I'm going to get a UX job. So I started looking for freelance positions, and I found this guy. I had a friend who's like a hardcore like coding maniac. Like he's super, super good. And he somehow found this guy named Glenn, and he was an aerospace engineer. And on the scale between artist and engineer, Glenn was like off the scales engineer. Like he didn't care what anything looked like. He just wanted to know the mechanics of it, the numbers, the data, all that kind of stuff. And he was a genius at it. What he did was, and the reason that he hired us was because he had figured out how to turn like a $5,000 piece of hardware that search and rescue was using, and turn it into something that you could use on your phone with like a $10 USB radio. And so he's like, I just need like an interface for people to actually be able to use it, you know? So I went home, I spent a couple of weeks designing this app, and I put together a prototype so that, you know, he could actually click through it and he could play with it and do all these things. And so I go and meet with Glenn, and for like 15 minutes, I'm walking him through this app. I'm showing him how it all works, explaining how like I translated his notes and his mechanics and things into like a usable interface. And like, it looks okay, you know, it's not incredible. But the whole time he's sitting here just like this. Now this isn't Glenn, it's just a stock photo of a guy, but exactly like this, right? Just, and I was like, oh crap, like he hates it. And after this 15-minute pitch, I asked him, I was like, hey, you can tell me if this sucks, you know? And I was like, what do you think? And he like, I love it. There we go. There's happy. And that was like that was one of the first times where I had such like a powerful emotional response to something, where this guy, he had been working for who knows how long on this thing, like, you know, endless hours on this project. And all of it was just data, charts, like all these things just on notepads, you know. And I was able to bring his idea to life, like something that he could hold in his hand and see that it was working. I mean, it didn't actually function. It was just a prototype, but my buddy ended up building it. And then I think he sold it for like $4 million or something like crazy. But it was just a really, really cool experience where I was like, man, this can make people happy. You know, it can bring people real joy and success in life. So it was shortly after this that I got my first UX job, and that was with Workfront. So the way I see it, there was really four main things that allowed me to get that first UX job. First was UX case studies. I'm sure you guys know what case studies are. I know they're way too small to see here, but if you want to see how I put them together, you can go to my website. It's just phildangerfield.com. It's pretty straightforward to see how I put them together. But case studies, everybody's got an opinion on them. Personally, I feel like you should write your case studies as though you were talking to somebody. Don't write them like, don't write a 40-page book about this little project that you did, you know, like get to the point, show them exactly what you did, what the results were, and most importantly, show your process, right? People don't care what your result is because they don't need that result, right? They're not hiring you because you found a result for a different company. They're hiring you because they want to know that you think in such a way that you're going to find a solution for them. So I went through about 5 rounds of interviews. I shouldn't have really put this here because it's not a requirement, but a lot of companies, they're going to put you through a lot of round interviews. So in my opinion, when you're ready to start applying to jobs, like apply to a whole bunch and start interviewing as many as you possibly can, because it's going to suck when you go through 4 rounds of interviews and then they're like, oh, sorry, or they just ghost you and you're like, oh, like I invested so much time and energy into that one company, you know. Anyway, that's just random little tip. Okay, soft skills. Do you guys know what I mean when I say soft skills? Kinda. All right. So soft skills are things like your ability to communicate, problem solving, critical thinking, leadership, stress management, openness to criticism. That's a huge one. Like if you can't take criticism well, you are not going to succeed as any kind of a designer, because you will get criticism, whether it's valid or not. You're going to find plenty of people who will give you criticism just because they feel like that's their job. You know, they're like, I am project manager, therefore I have to give input. Otherwise, I'm not earning my pay or something. It's stupid. But you'll find people like that all the time. So soft skills, these are all things that you can learn. And I've actually talked to quite a few people where they say, I struggle with this because I'm an introvert. And I'm like, I hate to hear that, because the vast majority of designers, I feel like, are definitely not extroverts. These are all skills that you can learn as an introvert 100%. In fact, a lot of them benefit from introversion. From like a psychological perspective, there's a huge amount of benefits to both extroversion and introversion. It has nothing to do with weaknesses or strengths, but I can talk to you guys about that another time. And then the last thing is storytelling and practice. So before I got this job at Workfront, I practiced. So those stories that I told you about, like the bees and Glenn, and there's a few others that I had practiced, but I had practiced each one of those stories like literally 200 times out loud while I was like driving, while I was working, while I was like cooking, like whatever. Like I would practice these stories over and over and over and over. And then as I did that, I started to recognize when things stopped, when things weren't important, and what things really were important that I needed to emphasize and expand on. And so the more you tell these stories and the more you understand the story itself, the better you're going to be able to tell it, and the better you're going to be able to highlight what makes you so strong and why you're telling that story, and what you can bring to the table in their case, right? In their particular situation where they have different, they've got different problems than you've solved in the past. So storytelling and practice, those are two things that like absolutely invaluable. Those two things will get you through interviews, no problem. Because if you've made it to the interview, it means they've seen your resume, they've seen your portfolio. Now they need you to tell your story in such a way that you're convincing them to show them, yeah, you're the best choice. So I was at Workfront for a while, and then Adobe bought Workfront. And some people were lucky enough, like me, to actually get transferred over to like the core Adobe side of things. Like I said, I was lucky that I was able to go to the demand generation side of, or like the B2B side of Adobe. So now I design web experiences for purchasing managers, where basically their job is to seek out the best tool or software for their company of 1,000+ people that's going to help solve their problems. So it's a cool job. I do a lot of testing. I work with like really, really, really talented people. It's cool. So I tried to bust through that as quick as I could, because I love the Q&A portion. I think that's probably the most valuable part of it all. So I guess we can kick it over to that.
Are there things in everyday life that you find that irk you, like just sort of some sort of like you'll be going down the street and you see something poorly designed? Is there something like that that irks you as you sort of?
No. I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's like literally every single day. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I kind of realized that UX design was for me, was that I just constantly found things that I'm like, who designed this? Like, obviously it wasn't like someone who thought about it. Like some dummy was just like, oh yeah, that'll work. And then some other dummy just approved it, and I'm like, oh, like there's so much potential that's just untapped in stupid products. Like just the other day, I went to go get a car wash, and there was 2 lanes, and there was a sign above each lane, and both the signs were like infinitely confusing. And I was like, what is this? Like, what? I don't understand what they want anyone to do. And so people were just filling both lanes. And then there was an employee I could see, she was like losing her mind, because one of the lanes was supposed to be for like monthly memberships, and the other one was for like cash only. Like it didn't make any sense. And she was like losing her mind trying to direct the cars, and like, oh my gosh, it was just a mess. And I'm like, if somebody had just thought about it for like 30 seconds, they could have just put memberships, cash only, and that's it, and so it was like 40 words I don't know. I'm very passionate about these kind of things, because it drives me nuts. Or like billboards, I see terrible billboards all the time, and I'm like, they're spending like $5,000 a month to have that up there, and all it took is to pay a good designer $300 to design that. That kind of stuff drives me nuts. What else?
I find talking about storytelling practice.
Sorry, say that again. It's kind of
storytelling and practice.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so when it comes to storytelling, let me find here. I had a thing.
Why do you look that up? I mean, I came across a phrase that kind of changed the way I talk, the way I talk to people in the interview, is facts tells, stories sell.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Fact, tell, stories tell.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, people, when you're in that interview, I tell young designers this all the time. People hire for compatibility over capability, like every time. Because I mean, who would you rather hire? Person A who's got a PhD in graphic design, but they're just like so abrasive, like they just so condescending, and they're just like they think they're better than everybody and they won't take criticism. Or do you take person B who's like they're pretty good at design, but you know you could teach them and they're just like happy to learn. They want to listen and they're like they want to have fun and they're happy to joke around. You're gonna hire person B every single time. In fact, I know for a fact that I got hired for that reason. At Workfront, I talked to the team after I was hired, and I kind of became friends with them. And I was like, "How many people like applied for my position?" And they're like, "We were interviewing, or not interviewing, but they're like, we had active applicants that we were like communicating with, like 82 of these people, right? And it came down to me and this one other guy, and the other guy had experience in work management technology, which is what Workfront does. And they're like, we just felt like we could just work with you more." And I was like, that's crazy, you know, like I didn't have experience in work management technology, but I just showed through my storytelling that I was able to work with people. I was happy to listen and understand, and I was happy to take criticism and just improve time and time again. And because of that, they're like, yeah, Phil's our guy. So yeah, definitely. Okay, there was one in the chat. I almost forgot this was a thing. What skills, abilities, and personal attributes are essential to success in your job / this field? So that I tell people this constantly: your ability to listen and ask questions. They're separate, but obviously they're tied together. So when you meet with a client or your stakeholder, when I say stakeholder, do you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay. So your stakeholder is the person who's that you're trying to please, right? They're the ones whose project it is that you're working on. Whether you're working with a client, like a freelance client or freelancer, or sorry, a freelance client or a stakeholder, like actively listening and trying to understand the problem is like paramount. If you don't understand the problem, I guarantee you finding the solution is going to be infinitely harder. It sounds kind of counterproductive, but focusing on the problem like 80% of the time of doing your research and really understanding the problem helps you get to your solution way faster. Because when you really understand the problem by listening to people, and not often people really know how to vocalize what the problem is, right? They're not trained designers. They don't speak our lingo. They're just trying to explain what's going on that they're trying to fix, right? And you have to kind of read between those lines. You have to really listen, ask questions. And as you understand the problem, all the potential answers that are probably wrong start to fall off. And eventually you're just left with like 2 or 3 like really obvious ones. You're like, there is no other answer. Like, it's obviously this is obviously the way that we're going to go. Yeah, so your hand.
And yeah, how do you develop that skill of listening? Because I currently kind of like work as a graphic designer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people just need stuff designed in my company, and I guess I just don't know what questions to ask in that moment, because I don't know, I'm trying to listen too much, but then later I have to follow up with questions, and I don't know how to do that all at once. I guess, like, how do you develop that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good question, really good question, and I'll tell you why. Because listening doesn't always just mean not talking, right? You can just sit there and shut up, and they just like they'll do the same. Once they feel like they've told you everything that they would need to know, they'll stop talking and just say, all right, go at it, you know. that's where I think your method is the right one, where you say, all right, I'm gonna start working on this, and as I have questions, I'm gonna come back to you. And I do that constantly. You know, I have clients who are like, okay, what questions do you have? I'm like, well, I have to do my research. I have to look at your website, start looking at the industry that you're in, like all these things. I'm going to come back and I'll have some questions for you later. And people are happy with that. Like if you say, oh, I don't have any questions, then they get a little nervous, because then they're like, I don't think this person understands me, and they're just going to try and, they're going to wing it. And that works about 2% of the time. The other 98% of the time, you're going to have to go back and do it again, or just at very least tweak the solution you came up with. So yeah, I tell them straight up, I don't have questions right now because of what you've given me. I'm going to go do some research, and then I'll come back with some good questions for you. And then like people are happy to answer questions. That's the other thing, is like, you are not bothering your client or your stakeholder by asking them questions. And if they're bothered by it, that's their fault. All right. That's their negative. It's not on you to have a lack of questions. That's actually another thing I was going to hit on, was asking dumb questions is like one of the best things you can do in a company. If you're that person who in a meeting asks the question that to you is if you just assume like, oh, everybody in this room knows the answer to this question, I would look so dumb asking it. Like, ask it every single time. You'll never be that person that people are like, oh, there goes Phil, the guy who always asks dumb questions. Like, nobody thinks that. And I tell you that you keep asking dumb questions, the questions that you think are obvious, but you don't know the answers to, keep asking those. And I promise you, you'll be one of the most informed people in that company within like weeks. Because most people don't ask those questions because they're afraid of looking dumb. And then once you kind of get that holistic picture by asking questions and getting those answers, like you start doing that cumulatively. And yeah, before you know it, you're the guy who has the answers to like everything. And you understand how all the pieces of the company work together. And it just makes life easier because you can communicate with all the teams. You can communicate with the leadership. Yeah, it becomes way easier. That's a really good question. All right, we have any other ones in the chat? Nope.
Yeah, there are a lot. Maybe if you refresh it, or like 6 or 7 questions there.
Wait, what? I can't hear.
By refreshing your page, it like.
Oh. Do I need to refresh it?
Maybe, I think so. If not, I can share my screen with the question.
Oh, dude, there's a whole bunch. Oh my gosh, man. You would think that something like this would just automatically refresh, but okay. Do you wait, do you do do you do personal projects? And if so, how have they benefited you? Yes. So when it comes to personal projects, I don't do like app design for personal projects. I did do, let me find it real quick. So I created my own baby product. Here, I'll share my screen real quick. So I invented my own baby product because my baby was like spitting up, and the burp cloth, it was like literally running the whole length of the burp cloth and then onto my pants and then onto the couch. So I was like, okay, this is literally, it's just not enough, you know? So I ended up creating my own baby product. And so this is the case study where I walk through like step by step exactly what I did, how I designed things. Like this is the box for it. And I used my wife and my son as like the model for the box, and how I went about like creating the CAD file, and how I found a manufacturer in China because American manufacturers wouldn't do it, and how I did like user testing and market testing, that kind of thing, and then how I was going to take it to the market, and then I got a cease and desist because somebody trademarked the name Burp Buddy a month before I did. So that kind of put a hamper on things, but it was a really cool project. Like it was a really straightforward like product design case study, you know, where I found a problem, I went through the steps to like, I went through all the research steps, I iterated, I created a final product, and then like post-production, all that kind of stuff. So it was a really cool project. As far as like, I guess this one was freelance until I didn't get paid for it. So now I'm considering it a personal because I own the property. Yeah, Quester was like a D&D online tool that ended up just collapsing because the business partners just bailed on the one guy, and then the one guy just ghosted me. So I was like, well, I guess this is my intellectual property now. But yeah, this was a really cool project where I did a lot of my own research. Actually, I did all my own research because they didn't really know what to look for. But all the real benefit of these, not only is the experience where you figure out how to like tackle these different kinds of problems, but just simply having a nice case study on your website, just having 6 instead of 3 is just a lot easier. It's a lot better for a potential employer to pick through and find a good case study that fits more in line with what they do, you know. There was another story I was going to tell you guys. Oh, okay. This actually answers one of the questions I saw earlier. At least I think I did. Okay, so there was this UX guy that he's got like 4 years on me. He's really, really good. He's a great designer. And he had this job that he was trying to get at, I think it was Patagonia, right? It's like the outdoor clothing company. And it was like lead UX guy, like super high role. And he was like one of 3 people who was in the running left. And he really, really wanted this job. And he clearly would have been the best for it. And he put together this like amazing video, like demonstrating like his application was insane. Like he put more work into his application than I have like most of my portfolio. And they ended up saying, oh, we're going to go with somebody else. We feel like your visual skills aren't up to par. And he was like, what? And he showed me the video and I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. Like, this is beautiful. And I was like, well, show me your website. And so he showed me his website and he had kept up a bunch of his old projects from when he was like a young designer that were like really rough. And I know that somebody on that hiring team went through his website and they found like just one of those projects and it just stuck in their head. And they're like, this is what that guy is, you know, like this is the level of visual fidelity that this guy's at. And so they're like, oh, I don't know. And so it like broke his heart, you know? And so we went through the whole website and he redesigned the whole thing. And like he just pruned and cut out a whole bunch of that old garbage. And like, it's cool to show, it's cool to see like how you've developed over time, but your portfolio needs to represent who you are today and like what you're capable of today. That's one thing that I always stress to people because they're like, I don't know why I'm not getting calls back. Like I have a huge portfolio. I'm like, well, that's one sign. If you've got 4 years of experience and you have a huge portfolio, you have way too many things in your portfolio. Like someone should be able to come to your portfolio, your website or whatever, and scroll through it and be done in like 5 minutes flat and see like most of everything you have on there. It should be the absolute cream of the crop, that kind of thing. Okay, what kind of problems do you deal with in your current job? So, I mean, this is probably pretty common across most corporate jobs, but just because I have, I've got stakeholders who are like, so I've got engineering stakeholders, I've got, you know, product engineer, director or whatever. He's trying to get this project done. And then you've got the marketing director, and then you've got the copywriter, and then you've got your UI guy. And so they all want different things, and they all think that their particular thing is the most important part of that project, right? That's just going to happen. Everybody thinks that their part of their part in the project is the most important. And the thing is, they're not wrong. Okay, so obviously every project requires input from all these parties. But the problem and the stress that it puts on me is they all want potentially different things in the project. And so I'd say that the vast majority of the friction that I feel in my job is trying to please everybody all at the same time. When you're in startups, if you guys can get into a startup at the beginning, that's the best. Number one, because you have to wear a whole bunch of hats and do a whole bunch of things. And it's going to be like the refiner's fire, man. You're going to go through some heck to make it in that job, but you're going to learn really, really fast. And like by the next time you go to your next job, you're going to be like 1,000% more capable. Wait, what was I talking about?
Problems you're facing in your job.
Oh yeah, problems you're facing. So startups are also good for that reason, because there's less people to please, right? You probably have 1, maybe 2 steps away from the CEO. And that's just nice to be able to get approval from the guy who's in charge or the woman who's in charge. Okay, cool. What else? Okay, how did I start out? With a pirated version of Photoshop in high school. That's how I started out. Actually, that's not true. I started with GIMP, the free image editing software, and then I pirated Photoshop. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, the first time I was just doing like YouTube tutorials. I tell people all this all the time. I'm like, YouTube is your friend. Anytime you don't know something, just YouTube it. It's free. And there's like some of the best designers in the world make YouTube tutorials. So like, yeah, learning software. If I was applying for a job and they said, we need you to learn Figma in order to do this job, I would have Figma mastered in 2 weeks, no problem, because of YouTube, like hands down, no problem. I guess that kind of answers that question. How did you get started? Oh, that was an earlier question. Okay, what else do you have any other questions? Should I refresh the page?
Can we connect with you on LinkedIn?
Can you? No, I'm exclusive. Can't. No, definitely. You should definitely connect with me. And when you have questions, like, don't hesitate. Like, just message me. You're not bothering me. I might not reply like super fast because I do have a lot of people messaging me, but I promise I will try and get back to you. And like I said, I'm always happy to jump on a call with you and like work through a problem, or like, yeah, if you're like, how do I listen better? Like, just message me. I'm happy to do it. Oh, this is a good one. Okay, going back to stories, I find that I'm usually focused on the end product. Do you have any tips on ways to build the stories that don't focus on the end goal? Yes. Okay, documentation. So here's the thing. People love to see the end product. When it comes to graphic design, that's all they care about. Nobody cares how you got to that end product in graphic design. In UX, it's the opposite, where they only care about the process that you took. Yes, the end product is you want to make the end product like beautiful. You want to be able to present it and people are like, wow, that's nice, but at the end of the day, that solution is not going to help this company. If it's a different company, it's going to be a totally different problem, totally different solution. So documentation is the key there. So when you first meet with a client and you start taking notes and you go home and you start doing your research and you start drawing up wireframes, like save those sketches, save those notes, do all like document everything, keep it all organized in a folder, take pictures of your notes, take pictures of your sketches, because all of it can be used in like a case study. And so as you document things, in fact, it's funny that we're mentioning this now. I just posted a time-lapse video of me creating the presentation I just showed you guys, and I put it on YouTube. I'll have to send Leslie the link. Or I guess I could just post on LinkedIn, whatever. But I was like, I want to document how I made this presentation, because I did it in like an hour. And I was like, I was even impressed with myself. I was like, dang, that's pretty good looking for an hour of work. So yeah, I would say documentation is a really, really good way of helping you not focus on the end product. Let's see. That's pretty much the only new one. The only new question. What games do you play? I play Escape from Tarkov, Satisfactory, and well, that's pretty much it. Planet Coaster is like a really good one. I play all sorts of stuff, but I think Escape from Tarkov is probably my number one. Sweet. Is there anything else you guys want to chat about now? If not, like if you have a question that you're like, I don't really want to ask here, like just like I said, just hit me up on LinkedIn.
I'm curious about networking. The phrase, it's not about what you know, it's who you know.
Sure.
Any
Yeah.
thoughts you have on that, how we can network?
Yeah. So networking, it's kind of hard because I know people who network by going to like networking events, where they go to like, I don't know, somebody will set it up and then you go and it's just like a whole bunch of people in suits, like handing out business cards and stuff. Like that's never been the way that I've ever connected with anybody. And I feel like the vast majority of those connections, they don't amount to anything. And so for me personally, networking is about people you went to school with, like professors. Like I've worked with old teachers before that are just like friends now, and I would say just like people you work with, because it's kind of interesting nowadays. It used to be that you stay at a company for 20 years, you get a golden watch, and then you can retire, or 40 years, whatever it is. Now it's like you stay at a company for 4 years and you're one of the oldest employees in the company. And so there's a huge amount of turnover, and there's good reason for that. Like I jump ship probably every 2 to 3 years at most, because you can increase your salary way faster by changing companies than staying and waiting for that 3% raise. Like there's no comparison at all. And like they try to sweeten it by giving you perks, or like, oh, we've got really good health insurance. Everybody's got good health insurance. Like it's become like a standard, or like, oh, we have free snacks. Everybody has free snacks. It's not a thing that like, it doesn't make you unique anymore. Like at the end of the day, for me, it's like pure dollar amount. I just want to know how much you're going to pay me. And those 3% raises, they don't amount to much, especially with inflation. Like 8.3%, yeah, that's not going to cover like my 3% raise. Like I'm in the hole because of inflation, so yeah, changing jobs is definitely the fastest way to increase your salary, but you have to do it intelligently. If it's like every 6 months, people are going to start going, oh, I don't know about this guy. Like we don't need somebody for 6 months. We need somebody for at least a year, because a lot of times these projects, they take months of research and then months of iteration where you're actually designing the product, and then like months of testing and reiteration, and then you're doing that across like 12 different projects. And so it's risky to have somebody who's like, yeah, every 6 months, it's just not a good look. So I always say minimum of a year, and if it's a really good company, you can stick around for a while. But back to networking. Okay, back to networking. The number one source of networking for me is people who leave those companies. I've been hired by people who have left a company. So I was working at the Bees. I had 2 people leave, and then they ended up getting me like connected with their hiring managers, or they got me connected with like a freelance client. So like, because I had really good relationships with them and they knew how I worked, they were like, hey, I know a guy who's a great designer. Like, I can get you connected with him. So those, to me, those are the absolute best networking resources. I mean, you spend hours and hours a day with these people, right? Like, it's worth your time to like build those relationships so that when they go off and they go do off and bigger and better things, like they're gonna the chance that you're gonna be able to tag along with them is a lot higher. So yeah, it's not so much about like, oh, your uncle's a rich lawyer, so maybe he can get you a job. Like, no, it's about the connections and the relationships you actually build with people. Anything else?
What's the best way to use LinkedIn?
I would say just post a meme a day, and I'm just kidding. I wish people posted more memes on there. I think the best way to use LinkedIn is to just simply share your accomplishments, like even little things, you know. Don't use it to virtue signal. Don't use it to like share your sob story. Like, it is a professional website, right? You can use Facebook and you can use Twitter and Instagram for all those other things. Like, use LinkedIn as a professional network, even though the algorithm does not promote that sort of thing. Like, that's what you should use it for, because I'm telling you, future employers, they will check your LinkedIn and they will go through your activity and see all the things you commented on. And they're going to check to see like what you posted. Like, it's absolutely a thing. I tell high schoolers, like one of my old professors or old teachers that's now a friend, she has me come talk to like her high school classes and stuff. I tell them all, I'm like, get a LinkedIn account right now and start like developing it, start filling it out, start adding stuff to your resume, start adding skills. People will start endorsing you, start leaving you recommendations. I don't know how much like skill endorsements and recommendations matter, but they definitely don't hurt, you know. There's definitely going to be hiring managers who like their LinkedIn is like their number one resource. And so if they come to your profile and it's just bare and you don't even have a profile picture, they're going to be like, I don't know who this person is, you know. Speaking of not knowing who somebody is, this is an interview tip. Keep your LinkedIn profile picture updated. And it's not because it's like, oh, look how beautiful I am. It's, you don't want there to be a disconnect between who you are online and who the person is who comes in for the interview. If you show up and you look totally different, or you're wearing you know, some formal wear or something, they're going to be like, I don't know who this person is. Like, if we hire them, they're not going to show up wearing a suit every day. Like, I don't know what this person actually wears, you know? So that's why I always tell people, like, do not wear a suit to an interview. It's like one of the worst things you can do, because like, it just sets this precedent that you're like a phony. Like, yeah, I don't know. That's one thing that drives me nuts. I've had a couple of people like come in for interviews in suits, and I'm like, look, I'm sure you're a nice dude, but are you going to come in wearing like, I don't know, capris or something? Like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with capris. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. You're just like, you're wearing this facade. Anyway. What was the other interview thing? There's a whole bunch of interview things, man. People suck at interviews. And it's not their fault. It's not like interviews like is a core part of life, you know. It's just a thing you do every once in a while. So it's not like it's their fault when people are bad at interviews, but you definitely want to be good at interviewing. So practice. That's the other thing. Like, practice makes perfect. Like, talk to family and like, hey, I want to practice telling this story with you, like how I'm going to present this, like, and I need honest feedback. Actually, that's probably bad advice. Don't talk to family. Talk to like a friend who like doesn't really like you that much, because you're going to get some, like, you'll get honest feedback. That's one of the things that about research and feedback and testing is, like, don't ask people for feedback that have a staked interest in you being happy, because they're just going to tell you what you want to hear. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, how did you get to art director? Like, what did that take?
Dude, honestly, it's just title. It's just graphic designer. It's because I was the only graphic designer at the Bees. That's why I was art director.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was just me. There was literally 3 people who ran the entire marketing of the Bees. It was me, the marketing director, and some what was her program director. Basically, she was the one who ran like the games in between innings. It was like, that was the 3 of us, you know? So I was like, I'm the art director. But honestly, there's not a huge amount of difference between art direction and graphic design. The main difference is art direction. You get to decide the initial parameters that the graphics or the direction of the art needs to go. So graphic designers, they're just order takers, right? They're just told, we need this, we need this, we need this, and you just make it, you know? So that's the main difference. If you can learn to start making decisions and start like really thinking about things, that's the hard part, man. Creative people, from like a psychological perspective, creative people really struggle at the bottom of a hierarchy. So if you're a level 1 graphic designer at a company, like, it's hard. And I know that because I was a lowly graphic designer for years. And it was really, really hard for me because I'm like, I just want to be part of the meetings where they're talking about these projects. I don't know why I'm doing this, like, and I don't understand the purpose and like the outcome. I'm just creating this like thing, and that's it. And I just ship it off. So I'm like, it really bothered me that I didn't understand the why or like the how or who was involved behind it. I was just like, I just got an order and I just filled the order and sent it out. And so that's the hard thing with creative people, is like we struggle in those like lower hierarchy positions. It's not until we start making decisions and start like using our critical thinking skills, because creative people naturally are very good critical thinkers, like very, very good at it. And so we're extremely valuable higher in the hierarchy structures within companies or within whatever organization.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I kind of have a question going back to interviews. How does an interview for a design or UX design position, how is that different? You're talking about storytelling. So is that just like talking through projects, or kind of what you typically see?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if there's, I'd say the core difference between like graphic design and UX, like I said, it's all about like the end product versus the process. With graphic design, you're an order taker. They just want to know that you can do it, regardless of, they don't care what process you take. They just want to know that you can do it. And so it's a lot more visual, where you can walk them through. Here, I'll share my screen again. Like if I wasn't going to a graphic design interview, I could just come in here, click on this and be like, here's some cool stuff that I did. You can see that I understand like lighting and contrast, and you can see that I understand like composition and color theory. And this was a really fun place to work, but it was crazy. It was perfectly posh. It's like a skincare company. The CEO, that's the other thing. CEOs or creative people are really, really good at starting companies. They're terrible at running them. So she was definitely a creative person, and the company had gotten too big. And so she didn't know what to do. And so she thought every time she thought that sales were directly tied to the amount of changes we made to the website. So it got bonkers. I mean, they were wanting like new products. She wanted us to like reskin the whole website like once a week. It was crazy. But yeah, graphic design, I would just come through, I'd show them, oh yeah, these are all the things, and yeah, I can do this and this and this, and they're like, okay, great. We can see that he knows how to use Illustrator or whatever it is. But with UX, you'd come in, they'd say, look, well, this is one thing that I always do. I ask them about the problems they're trying to solve right now. And based on that answer, I'm able to like pick one of these, you know, I'm like, okay, Polaris. This is one where I was able to take nothing but like raw information and turn it into a working prototype, you know? And so based on the answer of like what question or what problems they're trying to solve, you kind of walk through this. And I don't recommend, when you're actually in the interview setting, don't recommend walking through your actual case study like this, like on your website. It just kind of comes across as like a little unprofessional, because the chances are that they've actually gone through your whole website. Like if you've made it to that point where you're actually, they actually want to hear these stories, like most likely you're on round 2 or 3 of interviews. And by that point, you're probably in the top like 10, top 15. And so they've gone through this. So if you just go through it again, they're like, we've already seen this. We already know this. Like, we've already seen these images. We've already seen your final product. So I would take the time to put together like I wouldn't say PowerPoint, but just a presentation that kind of goes through stuff that you didn't cover in your case study and goes into a little bit greater detail. And then you can create multiple versions of that each focus on different parts. Maybe you're like, I could create a version of this of Polaris where it focuses on like the research before I started designing. And then when you get into that interview setting and they're like, yeah, we're really struggling with like we're launching products and then they just fall flat. And you're like, well, that's because you're not researching, right? You're not understanding the problem before you start building. And so then you kind of just curate what you do and what you show and those stories you tell in the interview based on those answers. And that's another thing, man, that asking questions, that whole concept of asking questions, that absolutely applies to interviews. Like listen to what they're saying, ask really deliberate questions. And like interviews are not supposed to be interrogations. And if it's an interrogation, it's their problem. Like it's their fault. They're bad interviewers. And I've kind of, I mean, I was nice about it, but I've told people before, like that's a bad interview question. Like, and then I kind of told them another question that they should have asked. Again, I like padded all this, like really, I was really nice about it, but like, I'm like, why don't I show you why I blah, 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 blah. And I mean, trust me, there's a lot of bad interviewers. So like when you go into an interview, think about it as an exchange between two people, not an interrogation. Because if you go into an interrogation, like you're going to be so nervous and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to forget like really important parts of your projects. Again, I mean, it's a lot easier said than done. I understand like you're going to be nervous no matter what you do, but it's going to come with experience and it's going to come with time. Like as you go into more and more interviews, you start to realize like this is supposed to be a back and forth. Like I'm asking questions, I'm trying to understand them, because the last thing you want is you end up with a job that you hate. Like that's not good. Not only because it makes you miserable, but because now you're going to go and try and find another job and you're going to have, I was here for 3 months, you know, and I just hated it because I didn't ask enough questions and it just doesn't look good, you know? Yeah, there's a lot to it. I understand like when you're first starting out, you're like, I will take any job. And there's some there's some merit to that, you know, I will take any job, because your first UX job is by far the hardest. And if it comes super easy, I would like ask a lot of questions, you know, because once you have that first UX job, you actually start to gain the skills needed for the workplace. And like I have a hard time telling people in high school that they should go to university if they want to be UX designers, because I feel like there's a disconnect between what they're learning in class for 4 years, and then when they get to the workplace, they're like, yeah, we don't do any of that. And and there is, I mean, there's a disconnect, but that doesn't mean that you're learning useless things. Like, that's the other hard part, is when I say, like, if someone tells me I'm a UX designer for whatever company, like, I don't know what they do. Like, I have no idea, because UX designer encompasses like 10 different roles, you know, and then each company uses those roles in different ways. So I forgot what I was even talking about in the beginning, but yeah, anyway. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Probably like way more than you bargained for, huh?
No, any information is good information.
Cool.
And I know I've been talking a lot, but I do have one more about your portfolio.
Mhm.
What do you use? Is it just like a website you made? Like,
Yeah, it's actually, I didn't make it. This one is hosted by Adobe Portfolio, and I've just,
okay, that's what I was.
yeah, I mean, it was just super easy. I think I'm actually in the process of reorganizing and rebuilding my entire portfolio. So I think I'm going to end up just like building it from scratch somewhere else. We'll see. There's a lot of really good resources, like free resources or next to free. There's a lot, like, you can host your website for really cheap in different places. There's companies or there's products out there that will let you host your portfolio for free. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Like, you don't need to build it from scratch. You don't have to learn how to code if you don't want to. I know some UX people do know how to code, but I don't know the first thing about it, and it's never hurt my career at all.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned
But that being said, you do need to understand how developers talk. Like, you need to be able to speak their language. Like, when you sit down with your developer and they're like, this doesn't work because our divs don't flow into each other, or like, you know what I mean? Like, you just need to be able to speak the language, and so you understand what they're saying. And then again, ask questions until you do understand, so that you're not designing stuff they can't make.
You mentioned earlier that you have 20 different projects going on at the same time.
Wait, sorry, I can't really hear you.
You had mentioned that you had lots of different projects going on at the same time, different stages.
Yep.
How do the different companies you work for manage this?
They all manage them in different ways. There's plenty of like project management software out there. There's, you know, Trello or Basecamp. Workfront is a work management platform, which is slightly different. But the problem with Workfront is it's so robust. I mean, it's designed for companies with like 1,000+ employees, where they're all able to work on the same platform and like integrate with each other. So it's super complicated. Like, it takes a lot of time to, like, you have to go through all these training seminars to understand how to use Workfront. Trello, you learn in like 30 seconds. Like, I keep track of my projects with a notepad. Like, I don't even use our own software. And yeah, when it comes to, and honestly, I rely on my project manager a lot. Like, he does a lot of, I mean, and you should be able to rely on your teammates to do their jobs. Yeah, my project manager, like, I'm always asking him, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do on this. I can't remember. Like, the last time I worked on it was like 3 weeks ago. Like, have we gotten our feedback in yet? And but like I said, it's not a luxury you're always going to have. So I would figure out a system that works for you and just go with it. Like I said, Trello is free and it's super simple, and it's a Kanban board. I don't know if you guys have heard that term before. There's different Kanban boards out there, but they're really, really useful. And as long as you keep up on it, you'll stay organized. That's a good question. You guys good? Yeah, if there's nothing else, like I said, just hit me up on LinkedIn when you guys think of other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate
Yeah, happy to.
it. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank
you guys.
so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.